process by which we invest falls into the following 4 parts. Number 1, an assessment of the business model. So it's basically if you brought McKinsey into a business and said, hey, is this a good or bad business? What would they do? And this is overly simplified, but basically they'd say, okay, what product or service does that business offer? What competitive advantage do they have relative to their competitive set? And is that competitive advantage sustainable over time? You know, Michael Porter, buyer power, supplier power, these types of things. But basically that's the idea, is competitive advantage and why is it sustainable? Part 2 would be assessment of the financial model. And here, to make it a little more colorful, what I say is, how about, hey Ted, how about we give you the financial statements of a company. We'll white out the name of the company so you can't see what company it is or what industry it is. We'll just give you the income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow. And we'll ask you if you have 15 minutes to tell us whether or not it's a good business or bad business, just based off of the financials. Okay, that's a good exercise. So what would you look at? Well, number 1, I'd look at cash flow. How much cash is being spit out of the business? What's being reinvested back into the business to have it grow? What's left over is free cash flow, and then how are they allocating that free cash flow? Number 2, I look at the returns on invested capital, right? So let's take 2 examples. General Motors has a lot of CapEx, and so ROIC is lower than, say, Nike, which has almost no CapEx because they outsource all the production to somebody else. So we look at ROIC, and then we would look at what we call the ROIC, the return on the incremental invested capital, so that the incremental dollar bill that's being reinvested into the business is at a higher or lower rate than the prior business. And that's a very big factor. Number 3, you look at what we call QOE, quality of earnings. So this is a whole other tangent we can go down, but basically GAAP accounting, GAAP accounting, is assumption-based. Now, in the real world, we're cash people. Well, I bought that piece of equipment for, I don't know, $100,000. I paid $100,000. Well, in GAAP accounting, we then get to choose whether we depreciate that piece of equipment over 5, 10, or 20 years. And depending on what you choose will impact your GAAP EPS. So if I choose 20 years, well, my earnings will be higher than if I chose 5 years. Well, as analysts, we just want to make sure we're understanding what assumptions were made and bringing everything back to cash accounting. And then 4th and finally would be valuation. So if I'm, okay, what kind of cash do I think they're going to generate out into the future, bring it back, discount back today and compare that to other stocks. So business model assessment, financial model assessment. 3rd is we want to know what's changed. So what is changing in the world, or what has changed in this company, or what has changed in this company's industry set that will tell us why this is interesting now. It's an old example, but for those of us over the age of 30 might remember Blockbuster. Okay, when we started back in 01, I can't tell you how many deep value guys you got to own Blockbuster. It trades at 5 times free cash flow. It's just it's so cheap. Well, obviously things were changing, and Blockbuster ceased to exist. I mean, Blockbuster traded 3 to 5 times free cash flow until it went to 0. And so you got to look at change, and change comes in many ways. It could be something as simple as a new product launch. It could be that company's new product launch, or it can be a competitor that launched a new product. It could be AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint, which is a 4-player oligopoly. All of a sudden, Sprint and T-Mobile merge, and now it's a 3-player oligopoly. So the competitive dynamic changed. It could be a new CEO comes in. A new CEO has a new strategy. It could be a new CFO comes in, and they have a new financial strategy and things that they want to focus on. It could just be, we saw very recently with both with Elon Musk and Twitter, now known as X, and with Zuckerberg and Meta, 2 great examples of CEOs saying, yeah, we don't need to spend all this money. And I mean, what did X go from 8,000 employees down to 2? Right? And so I think so many companies were like, wait a minute, yeah, we don't need all these people. And so, the rationalization and so the cash flow that then, spits out the other side. And then the last part, which is probably the most important, goes back to what I said about being fact-based decision makers, is what independent research can we bring to bear that is outside of the financial statements, outside of normal financial analyst work, that we can bring to bear that would help us make a decision here. And that's where we spend a lot of time.